into the topic of leadership, and his title today is simply It Depends. Ramesh, are you ready? Do we have Ramesh online? I
Hello,
believe
everybody.
all the way from Singapore. Is that right, Ramesh?
Yes, absolutely.
Ramesh,
Yes.
do we have a visual? Do we have audio? Do we have video? Now I can
Okay.
see
Are you
you. I can
ready?
hear you.
Okay.
I think we're good to
Hello,
go,
everybody.
Ramesh. The
Yes, I'm good
virtual
to go.
floor, yeah, it's your time to shine. The floor is yours.
Have you ever heard this question before? Train A leaves platform 1 at 2 o'clock, traveling at 120 kilometers an hour. And there is another train, B, that travels in the opposite direction at 150 kilometers an hour. And we all know, right? Doesn't matter which part of the world we came from. We all have heard this question before in one shape or form. And the question always is, at what time exactly do the two trains meet? And I'm telling you, for me as a 12-year-old kid listening to this question, I had an incredible answer. And my answer to my teacher was, it depends. And she was not impressed with that question because I had so many things that was running through my mind. Because how about the load? How many people were there on both trains? What was the topography like? How many stations in between? How was the weather condition? Were there any crossings in between? And most importantly, were they on the same track? Because if they were, there would be a loud explosion. And that is how I know the two trains have met. I am happy that some of you find this answer amusing, but my teacher was absolutely frustrated. She looked at me and she said a line which I still remember till today. She looked at me and she said, "Oh, Ramesh, why must you always overcomplicate things?" Hello, everybody. My name is Ramesh and calling in all the way from Singapore. And a special hello to all my kindred spirit out there who love to overanalyze, overthink, and think that there's always more to something and always frustrate the people around you. Today, the world is all about simplicity, right? It's all about that Zen lifestyle. I'm not sure who started it, but apparently that's the way to go, right? Clean, minimalism. Let's simplify everything. And today I'm here to speak up on behalf of complexity because I am so frustrated in so many conversations when people try to oversimplify things. Oh, yeah, that's right. A 3-hour workshop should sort out why your leaders hate each other. Absolutely, yeah. I'll be right there. And I'm guilty of this because I've been doing this for 20 years. And what customers, clients, and people want to hear is the simple solution. They don't want to be in that conversation of complexity. And today, I hope I can find at least one or two friends here who is willing to have coffee with me to discuss the things which can be simple, but they have a lot of complexity behind it. So if you ask a given audience, right, the simple answers often have more people gravitating towards it. But if you started off any talk and say, oh, it's going to be complex, you're going to see the number of people signing up not too high. And when you think about it, right, and in today's session, I will contradict myself by trying to make something complex simple, and I love it. And if you can follow me through the process, why is simplicity so powerful? Because it sells. Simplicity sells. Slogans, right? Just do it. You can make it. Stronger together. Let's publish that everywhere in the company and people will get it because it's that simple. It's very swift. It's easy to get an idea across. How do you know you're being conned by someone? Their answer to something is really simple. Just buy this. It'll work. And it's very settling when someone gives you a simple answer. If you go up to your father and you ask your dad, "Dad, if I get married, will I be happy?" The answer that we all want to hear is a very comforting, "Yes, son, it'll all be great." But if your father tells you, "It's going to be a journey, man. I'm not going to get married on that day." And a lot of people love simple answers because it's very soothing. It's very calming. Come on in to this yoga session. Yes, namaste. And all of your worries and problems and insecurities will all float away. And I think we have been on an accelerated path in trying to simplify everything around us. And while I think it's useful and while it is powerful, I think we need to pay homage to complexity. We need to build the muscles in ourselves, our organizations, in our children to be able to deal with that which is confusing, that which challenges your status quo, that which inside of itself is so contradictory, and at the most, it's chaotic. And let me tell you why I find a lot of organizations sometimes so hypocritical, because they see very opposing things and do not make any attempt in making them live together. For example, in every organization that I've ever been with, they always have simplicity programs, right? Let's accelerate the simplicity. But at the same time, they will have another workshop 3 weeks later about VUCA, volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, complex world that you live in. And people are left confused. Because I think that there is a need for us to marry what is simple as well as that which is complex. IKEA, the organization that has convinced all of us, including you, that you can build a shelf, that you can put up wall pictures in perfect alignment, made about 38.8 billion euros last year. But I'm very sure. Can I have a show of hands? How many of you actually have tried to build something from IKEA before? Okay. I think most of us at some point would be looking at their very interesting instruction and be like, what am I building? And at the end of the day, you don't build a chair, but rather an art installation. But I think it's a rite of passage. What makes IKEA so powerful is they have made something so complex and try to distill it down to the most simplest of ways of how you can build it. But anyone who has actually bothered to build something from IKEA will tell you that in order for you to build it, you must be willing to go through some stages of problem solving, troubleshooting, figuring it out. But by the third time you build it, it becomes a lot simpler. The way in is simple, but the journey is always complex. And I also would like to bring up the idea of why simplicity can also be very dangerous. And many of the problems that I see in my part of the world is got to do with people trying very passionately to reduce things, right? René Descartes in 1600s was the father who laid the foundation of reductionism, right? He was a guy who said we can break everything up into component parts and study it. But my question to all of us today is, does that apply to every situation in the world around us? And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this. Me, a little boy who grew up in Singapore, Indian, in a very complex environment, we grew up with very different philosophies, that life is not always about separating things, but rather to try to see things together, which is how in Singapore we have people of many different cultures and races living next to each other for the last 50 years in great prosperity. Because we chose not to just reduce people around us, but to rather understand and embrace the complexity they bring to the world around us. And I often wonder, when is it ever simple enough, right? When can you distill an idea to a point where it no longer resembles where it started? And I put to all of us today, you can disagree with me, and I think that's where the real conversation starts, that there is a crisis of oversimplification everywhere, and specifically in organizations. I was asked to do a diversity, equity, and inclusivity workshop some years ago for a European company. And their interpretation of what diversity is to have people come dressed in different costumes on that day and have a global event. And I was, thinking about it. And the reason why they brought me in was got to do with the melanin in my skin. And I hope it was also because of my ability to speak. But I think that was such a monochromatic approach to doing something. And when you have this oversimplification of large problems and difficult challenges so that it's convenient to pass it around, I think we are now in a situation where those who don't know don't care enough to truly know. In the world of 2-minute TikToks where everybody wants all information really quick, you saw it firsthand during the COVID crisis of how everybody became an armchair doctor and infection specialist trying to explain how things work, when it was a rapidly evolving environment. You also saw how, by people trying to oversimplify departments and functions, people no longer saw how working together was for the larger good. It narrowed the focus. And then they will run team building workshops to try to figure out how we can overcome the silo culture. we also have an environment where there's a lot of erasure of context. And personally, one of the things that I find very violent is filling up application forms, especially when they ask you to fill up things like your nationality, your race, your gender. I do write it because if I don't, they're not going to approve my loans and stuff. But I always wondered why. Why do you need to simplify me to that one singular element? And what benefit does it give anyone at all? Because I am one and I am more. I am not just one singular idea. And very often we find very shallow answers to questions that require more thought. And the thing that really annoys me the most is whenever you go to any fast food outlets these days and you ask them for a straw, I don't know how is it like in Scandinavia, but everybody says, sorry, we don't give straws anymore. And then I ask them why. I don't know. My company said no straws. And then I went to do my own Googling. Like, do straws really save the world? And apparently, according to National Geographic, it contributes to less than 0.008% of all plastic waste. But wait a minute! I am now greenwashing my organization. I am on the green train for sustainability, right? Because I am not allowing people to drink their favorite beverage with a straw. And I think these kind of things are things that organizations really need to step back and say, is it really necessary? In the rush to digitalize everything, I see it firsthand in my country, where the elderly who have no access or feel so uncomfortable to do digital banking no longer have that human touch. They feel so stranded at the shopping malls waiting outside these banks where they need younger people to try to help them figure out. We have taken away something from them because in the pursuit of trying to simplify business and banking, we have also forgotten and erased an entire group of people in society. I think all of these ultimately leads to rushed timelines, to problems that need more time to think through. And I think all organizations do suffer from this to some extent, which is called the next quarter thinking. Will whatever I do today help me show results in the next quarter? If the answer to that is not a firm yes, then we ain't gonna do it. So, my dear friends, the big questions in life, such as, do you take this human to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health until death do you part? These kind of big questions often demand that you give a very clear, yes, I do. Can you imagine for a moment in that situation, you looked at the person asking you the question, you said, it depends. It depends on whether or not this human being is willing to partake in all of my life's trials and tribulations. But that's too complex an answer. So let's go with a simple answer. Chop, chop, the cake is waiting to be cut. And I often find that in discussions and conversations, it leads to some sort of a Mexican standoff of this or that. It's either you are right or they are right. And I would like to humbly bring to this forum today something from my culture. And I think you would have seen this gesture anytime you have traveled to Asia. Some people know it as the namaste. In my culture, in the language that I speak, this is called vanakkam. Could I just invite everyone to try doing this together? It's such
Namaste.
I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm doing this.
Thank
and I would
you
like
so
to
much.
share with you an insight from this.
Ramesh, we unfortunately have to cut it off there. Ramesh.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, we
Okay,
are,
thank you,
a
everybody.
minute over. Yes, it's the simple rule that we have. We've oversimplified this to keeping everybody on time.
That's okay.
Ramesh, thank you. We don't have any questions from our audience, but thank you very much for that extremely
Thank you,
refreshing
everybody.
talk. But I do have a
Thank
question
you.
for you, if
Sure.
you would allow. Now,
Sure.
it is true that we need to look into how we can introduce more and more complexity, but of course that is complex. It is hard. What is the best in a nutshell? If if these workshops are this half-hour workshop is not going to solve our problems. And we know that the best ideas never come from workshops. The best ideas come from complex work done by individuals that can invent a patent. For example, a biodegradable straw. A biodegradable straw is a great Nordic invention by great companies that are very complex and that have provided a solution. Solutions are oftentimes complex. But what is the process of the future to help us absorb at least a bit more of complexity and nuance? If it's not the leadership afternoon or workshop, what is the ultimate process that we need to implement to introduce better and richer complexity into the oversimplification that we are now living through?
Wow. I shall attempt to be contradictory by giving you a simple possible answer. I think it comes from the state of not wanting to be right. It comes from the state of not saying, I am mightier than thou. Because in my culture, it's always been about this and that. We always take the good and the bad. So my dad always says, when you are having a good time, don't be too happy. And when you're having a bad time, don't be too sad, because life always goes. And it always depends. It's always hindsight is 2020. And I think it's about making it okay in organizations to ask or say things like it depends, and then have a conversation after that. And I think it's not always, and knowing that the simple answer is not the one that we need right now. I think that's a psychological frame upon which you can build and then penetrate a lot deeper. And my last point was a lot about collaboration. Collaboration will emerge automatically when a lot of people see this is too complex for any one human. And I think there's a much more natural way for collaboration to occur. That would be my answer.
Thank you so much, Ramesh, for that. And I know that René Descartes, from my culture, would be rolling in his grave now. Actually, I believe he passed away in Stockholm. Interesting at the time. It's an interesting detail from a Nordic perspective. But I think we do need to ally the worlds of complexity and simplicity to help us through these difficult times. Ramesh, thank you for sharing these insights.
And thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to have a chat with you.
Thank you.